All right, y'all, if you can't tell, it is officially spring, and we are out here trying to escape the existential horrors of modern life. Nah, just kidding. We're going to look for smallmouth, and I am going to give you the ultimate guide for finding spring smallmouth, so come along. All right, so it is March, and the first thing that we want to do is find where these fish are because they are certainly on the move. River smallmouth are migratory animals, and they can certainly cover larger distances during this time of year as they make their way closer to their spawning grounds, but they are also stopping at feeding stations along the way. So today we're going to talk about first is their initial migrations, when they take place, why they take place, and how we can use this time period to find fish concentrated in certain spots. So let's go ahead and get to our first spot, and then we'll get into it. So good sign, I'm seeing some really nice big red horse over here. Seeing other species of fish in the river is a good sign. There are some big ones here. Oh man, those would be so fun to catch. Ton of them. There's got to be 50 fish here. So there's a reason all these fish have stopped here. There's a little bit of a gradient change. We have a little more current. There's actually more depth relative to the rest of the river around it. It's like probably 6 feet right here where this current is kind of wearing things away. We have some nice heavy cover over there in the form of that log pile up, and then we have overhead cover on top of all that in the form of the bridge to protect from predators that may be flying. So these are going to be spots along the way that fish are going to stop at and feed, or at the very least hang around at for a few days, or maybe less. But either way, on their way upriver, there's a bite. Anyways, on their way upriver, they're going to stop somewhere to feed, and they want to do it in places that are really advantageous to them hunting. So as they work upstream, they want to stop at places that they can feed, but they also want to stop at places they can be safe. And if the weather turns completely, they don't want to be in an area that has just a ton of shallow water around it. They are still going to go deep, tuck up into cover until that passes, until the sun comes back out and that water starts to warm. Fish on, but I don't think it's a bass. Oh, it came off. There's a bass. I thought I saw a couple smallmouth swimming around with those red horse. Nice golden one on the jerkbait. So there's kind of a shelf here. There's this shelf rock that it gets deeper eventually, but there's a nice lip going all the way around. So it's maybe, I don't know, 12 feet or so off the bank, and it just goes and then it falls off. And so I'm fishing the inside of that in that deeper water, but look at where that sun is hitting. That sun's hitting all this rock right here and warming it up. And so they're sitting right on the edge of that rock in the sandy bottom that it butts up against. So really quickly, back to the topic of migrations. Studies on the Mississippi River have shown that smallmouth migrate up to 18 miles from their wintering locations to their spring habitat. And on other rivers in Wisconsin, there have been migrations tracked up to 70 miles. So we're talking extremely large distances. Obviously, we're not going to cover 70 miles of water. However, keeping this in mind, the fact that smallmouth move means they have to stop somewhere. And we are looking for feeding stations like this one that I'm sitting on. As we go upriver, we're going to continue looking for these feeding stations because these are going to be where fish concentrate. Some stations might be bigger. Some stations might have, 5, 6 fish. Others could have 10 to 12, double that, or on larger rivers, even more than that, concentrated in one spot before they move out. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that migrations do not all happen at one time, so you're going to be catching waves of fish. So this spot here might actually stay good over and over and over because it's lower in the river. So as fish work up from downstream of me right here, they're all going to stop here. But are they going to stay here for the entirety of the spring? No, absolutely not. They're going to go up and find their spawning grounds, but some of them might spawn around here. Some of them might spawn a mile up. Some of them might spawn 15 miles up. So you just don't know. But in that large stretch of river, we have to identify these feeding zones so that we can just run and gun and simply go from point A to point B to C instead of wasting time trying to find everything in between. There's certain times of the spring where fish are really going to be keyed in on these specific spots, and it's not worth fishing a lot of other areas. Another thing we want to keep in mind is if we're not finding concentrations of fish, if we're not catching multiples in each of these spots, especially as we get higher, if it starts to lessen and lessen and lessen, then that's a good sign that the fish probably haven't moved up as far as you want them to, and then it's time to kind of backtrack and start hitting the spots maybe a little further downstream. And on this river specifically, there have been times in the year in March where I've been further upriver and absolutely skunked, and the river was just pretty much empty, not a sucker, no nothing. So there is a specific time of the year that fish start to push up. Now, I'm not going to say it's dependent on temperature because I'm really not a big temp guy. I don't even know how cold this water is, and frankly I don't care, but I think length of day has a lot to do with it because fish are going to start to show up about the same time every year regardless of the conditions. Now if it's a little bit warmer, it's probably going to be more fish. If it's a little bit colder, it's going to be less fish, but I think those initial migrations start at the same time each year. Nice smallie. Nice smallie. Come on, stay on. Biggest one of the day so far, maybe a nice little 16-incher, little chunky guy. On the jerkbait, again, not in the mouth. They're swiping at it, but notice where I was. This is going to be an area that fish just cruise. Fish like this are going to cruise that, and they're going to hunt and feed along the way. And the thing is, even in a river that is this clear, you may not be able to see them, so never underestimate this fish's ability to hide because they are so good at blending in with their surroundings. Another nice one. He might be net worthy. That's a real nice one. Oh yeah, that's a nice one. That's a big one. Right up on that shelf where I said the sun was hitting the rocks. Stupid. I mean, sometimes on a river you just know it and you're just right, and that's what being out here, spending time on the water does for you. So get out before the other fishermen. Let them think that the water temperature matters. Let them say, oh, it's 43 degrees, it's too cold, because you're out there catching these. This is a good fish anywhere, but for this river especially, this is absolutely a trophy. He's pushing 19, maybe 20. You only catch a couple of these a season, and this is typically the time of year that I do personally. Wow, that is a good one. Oh, he came off again. Oh, that was a really nice one. Another thing I want to talk about today is fish positioning this time of year during the pre-spawn specifically. There's one. You can see that we have a little current break up there. And so fish, in my experience, are pretty much always going to be on the downstream side of these changes. I don't catch a ton of fish above a piece of structure like that. I find them on the back side of it pretty much exclusively this time of spring. And so it's going to be kind of, hook in the hand. Ouch. 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 Triple ouch. Took 3 hooks to the hand. Anyway, This one here is pretty subtle because we see a little current seam, and that's actually some really shallow rock, but it gets deeper behind it. And so it's kind of telling us that there's a piece of structure or a change in depth there, because we see the surface of the water changes right up ahead there. And on the backside of that tends to be where I find most of the fish. Some sort of change, some sort of current break, some sort of shallow spot with depth behind it. The fish is pretty much always going to be on the backside. I also find the same when it's wood cover and then there's current going around it and the wood itself is acting as a little current break. The fish is pretty much always going to be on that protected side, not sitting upstream. There are times of the year, specifically like the late summer, where I start to see fish pretty much almost exclusively feeding on the top side. This time of year we want to be looking downstream of cover, downstream of structure, downstream of depth changes, all of that. Now how far downstream is just a matter of your personal experience and is going to vary by the day most likely. So don't be thinking that they're going to be pegged right up to the top every single time. The distance away from cover in the change itself is going to vary day to day and as the season changes too. Not seeing a whole lot of depth, which isn't really what I want, but all that means is that when we do find depth, we're probably going to find some fish because they're going to be concentrated there based on everything that we've been talking about already today. Right where we found a little bit of depth. So here we've got a slight turn in the river, and as you can see, this side of the river itself has a much steeper bank. That doesn't always mean that there is depth right beneath it, but I could tell just by the color of the water, it's a little bit darker, that there's going to be some deep water along this left side. And I think up there it continues out into those two big trees. So we're going to fish this nice and slow, thoroughly. We're making our long casts. We're not really looking for individual pieces of cover because the deep water is so sparse in this section. There's most likely going to be cover in it on the bottom. There's rock here. So when we're in an area like this, obviously we want to fish the things that we can see, but at the same time we don't want to be constrained by just the things we can see. Throw into the deeper water and just have faith that the substrate is right and that there's most likely cover on the bottom, and if there's not, there's probably some form of current break in the form of a larger rock that the fish are going to be hanging around and congregating. So we're just going to throw in this deeper water. We're going to use the jerk bait as a search bait, and just like that, when we start to see a few fish, we want to really slow down and fish the rest of it thoroughly. Ooh, nice log right here. Deeper water. That's a good fish. Oh yeah. Oh, that's huge. Come on, don't do that. Don't do that. Just relax. Guys, that is an absolute tank. I mean, for this river, another trophy. Another trophy. Pays to get out early. Freaking giant, guys. This is not a big place. This is not a place where many of these fish live. This is a place where you get out early enough and you find the migrating fish that are going up in order to spawn, and you get first crack at them. That is what you need to do in the springtime. I'm gonna keep saying that. Can someone say feeding station? All right, let's see if we can get another one. That's 2 casts in a row. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, he's got one. Come on. He's got one. Follow me. Follow me. He's got one. Oh. That's another nice one. Not as big as the last. Another nice one, above average. Ton of fish here. So the cool thing about this spot, it doesn't stand out. There is more depth than the rest of the river that we've seen so far coming upstream, but that's really not what sets it apart. There's this inflow up here, a little heavier current, and it pushes out towards the left. And a lot of the fish that I'm catching are actually on the right side. And right there is actually not only more deeper water, but it's a little slower. So if we follow this bubble trail up here and we cast alongside that, that kind of marks the difference between that little faster moving water and that slower moving water. But also at the same time, there is a little bit of a rock to sand transition. So it seems like they're hanging around that transition in the slower water. Of course, that slower water has a little bit more depth relative to the rest of the river, and this area is pretty big. So I do like all the factors that come together in this spot, and I think that's a big reason why I'm gonna call this a feeding station. Evidently, there are multiple fish feeding here. I actually saw something jump out of the water earlier. Didn't think it would be a bass, but based on how aggressive these are, it very well could have been. And again, it is March, it's spring, the water's cold. I had to get out of the water in the waders actually because I was getting chilly with the sun away, and these fish are eating aggressively. So another point for getting out early in the year. As you guys probably saw in the aerial footage, there's one side that is much darker. It's got a lot of the rock, and that dark color is going to be an area, especially right on the transition, where smallmouth like to sit and hide because they can really blend in well. There's no way that we saw any fish on the drone footage, but evidently there were fish there. And prior to that, I'd caught quite a few. And so this time of year, we can't really be relying on our eyes to see fish and know when they're there, even if it is kind of shallow. Even if you think, okay, well, if I'm not seeing any fish here in this 2-3 feet of water, then I'm just going to move right through it. I don't think that's the smart move, especially when there's bottom cover, because those smallmouth just blend in so well. These clear rivers can be a little deceiving how deep they are. It's easy to see the bottom and say, ah, it's 2 feet, but then you get in and you realize you're up to your waist or even higher. And then there's more depth, and you probably should have been fishing that a little more thoroughly. That was weird. So I like up here on the right. There's another one. Man, they are just stacking. That's another big one. We're boat flipping you, buddy. Oh my gosh. How many big ones are there right here? Okay, we're gonna try to boat flip you. Goodness. It's another freaking big one for this river. Gosh. Eat it good. Look at that hook. Another nice one for this river. Throwing the swim jig, keeping it simple. Just banging it off the bottom. Once again, on the inside of this faster water. This turn swings it out to my left. You can see this bubble trail here. That's kind of a good indication of where you should be casting. Follow the bubbles is what I always say to myself. It's just a good rule of thumb for finding many different kinds of fish. Follow that bubble trail. I mean, how many casts have I thrown up in here? They're still biting. There's another one. Oh, that was another freaking giant. Are you kidding me? What is this stuff? And they're kind of, man, those are close to the boat too. Those are not like far away. So there's some water up there that's actually a little calmer than the rest. I mean, I'm sitting in very calm water up here, but the closer you get to that little riffle, there's one. Oh, that's big. Oh my gosh, how many are there in here? Oh, he came off. No. Damn it. That was another big one. So one thing I truly do believe in the spring, even though it may seem counterintuitive, is that the first instance of faster moving water that has depth and cover around it is really a big time fish attractor, especially for those fish that are feeding. I've had similar experiences up in Wisconsin on bigger rivers where the current is much heavier, the water's much deeper and everything, but the characteristics are pretty comparable, and it really makes sense if you think about it, because the fish may not want to be in the current. However, they're attracted to it because there's a lot coming down through it this time of year, and they don't have to sit inside of it. They can sit out to the outside, as we can see. They can sit on a transition, and they really have a much higher chance of bait coming down to them because that current is so much heavier in this part of the river than in the other parts so far. Now, this is kind of a unique example because I've come upriver, so this is literally the first example of a little heavier riffle with depth around it. And that depth isn't just like a 2-foot hole and then that's it. The depth kind of goes for a couple 100 yards, and it has good wood cover. It's got nice cover on the bottom. There's bigger rock, there's smaller rock, there's sand transitions. It's got a lot of really fishy stuff. So in the spring, again, even though it may seem wrong, go look for that faster current and then find the good stuff all around it and really fish those areas thoroughly. And don't be afraid to fish tight to the current along those current seams where it seems like the fish are actually in the current, when in reality, when you go underneath the water, they're probably not. Oh, this looks absolutely money. Oh yeah, there's some fish in here. Spooked something. Something up there getting some sun. Yep. Could be big. Feels big. Oh my gosh, missed him again. That was another big one. Oh, dude. Oh, no. Uh-oh. That might be a goner. So in this section of the river, we have a lot of outside turns with really good depth around them. We've got good substrate too. We've got a little shelf that falls off, kind of let's say 5 or 6 feet out from like the actual shoreline. But then there are these nice little protected areas like up here where the current is blocked. Now there's not much current anyway, but anytime you can find those slack protected areas while the water out in the middle is moving or even up against the side, those are going to be nice areas for the smallmouth to just hang out in. And like that one back there is literally just sunning up on the bank, and I spooked it and came out and bit it, and it was a freaking big one. That was cool. Let's wrap it around a tree. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, let's get you on the right side of the boat. All right, this spot here is a good example. You guys decide where you should be casting along this. It's pretty apparent. We'll see if we can find some fish there. So take your guess, take your pick. What was that? Oh, it was a smallie. Chased it, and they're not eating it the first time. Had multiple hits today on the same cast, the same fish. Got some good depth here. Man, they are not getting it. I'm using a smaller jerkbait. There we go. Pretty good one. We're gonna reach for the net. He's got it pretty good. We're gonna swing him around him. And we're going to get you in the net. Okay. Another nice 18 or so. Now we'll cast out where you shouldn't cast, and most likely aren't gonna catch anything. So thus far you can kind of tell how you can just really spot hop, and I know that all rivers are not like this river specifically. This one is a little smaller, so depth is going to hold a lot of fish throughout the year. However, these spots aren't going to always be the same from March to April to May to June into September, whatever it may be. But these spots right now, this time of year, you can literally go back to over and over and over again until the migrations have kind of stopped, and even then you're probably still going to catch some fish around it. However, starting at the bottom of this river where it flows into the bigger river, that gives us a reference point, and then relative to that, those first instances of really good habitat are going to attract fish, and these are going to be feeding stations for smallmouth in the spring. Oh, that was another one. Saw my line just tick a little bit. That's pretty good. Oh my God, they're all coming off today. This is about the same size as the last one. Smaller ones won't come off. All the ones I want to come into the boat. Not a bad one though. Look at all those fish.